What's up? I'm Matchstick and I review paranoir, noir with supernatural elements, which is basically the genre I write. Today I'll be talking about a book that isn't exactly noir, as it's basically an epic fantasy set in an inventive take on ancient Africa, but it's a very, very dark fantasy, and definitely includes the sort of thing you find in paranoir. The violence is over the top and grisly, the main characters are less than ethical, and there's a heavy, heavy dose of horror. If you enjoy stuff like John Constantine's adventures, you will almost certainly dig this book. Black Leopard, Red Wolf is written by Marlon James, who has written a lot of speculative fiction in the past, even though he broke out with a non-speculative Jamaican crime epic about the attempted assassination of Bob Marley, a book titled A Brief History of Seven Killings. That book won the Booker Prize in 2015, which is one of the bigger awards in fiction, and James appears to have taken that momentum into writing the Dark Star trilogy, of which Black Leopard, Red Wolf is the first installment. Now, the trilogy has gotten a lot of attention, not only because the series seems to have a crazy promotion budget. James has jokingly called the Dark Star trilogy the African Game of Thrones, and it is based on African myths and folklore and even some actual African history. I don't have much of a compass as far as how James did with incorporating that mythology into the story, but I did recognize the game Bawau, which is sort of the East African chess or Go. The Dark Star trilogy has been optioned by Michael B. Jordan and Warner Brothers, and if it were to be adapted, it would be an almost exclusively black cast. There's one character that isn't black or supernatural, and I believe he's Arab. But is it good? Yes, very. I had a hard time getting into it at first. I finished on my third reading, actually, but in retrospect, it was a lot like the first time I saw Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. I hated that movie, felt like I got a ton about Batman wrong, and I even hated Ledger's bizarre take on the Joker. Then I ended up watching it like 20 more times. Black Leopard, Red Wolf is a shock to the system in the same way. Fantasy can't do that, can it? But once I got past that reaction, it opened up for me and really blew me away. Here's who won't like this book. First, the squeamish. There's a lot of blood, a lot of sex, and a lot of just nasty shit. Another group that won't like the book is people that don't like to read. It's a little over 600 pages long and can drag in places. If you're not a reader, it'd be a lot. And another group that certainly won't enjoy the book would be homophobes. The main character is gay, and most of the sex is as well. As someone who isn't homosexual and is used to the relatively chaste and usually straight romantic subplots of most popular media, the raunchy gay sex scenes took some getting used to. Is it too much? I don't think so, but it's definitely different. All that said, should you read it? As I said before, Hellblazer fans will love it. It gets into the grit of life in ways that you really don't find in a lot of media. The dialogue has been called cryptic by some, and I would have to agree, but I would say that just adds to the charm. And the African magic and creatures are just cool in that things zig when you're expecting them to zag. The practitioners of what is called white science, for example, are a crazy spooky take on the mad scientist trope, and the lightning vampires are just a trip. I won't get too deep into the plot of this book, but the entire trilogy is basically a group of mercenaries hired for a mission, and this book mostly consists of events surrounding that mission. The Black Leopard of the title is one of the mercenaries, as is a man with a wolf's eye that narrates this first book, a character named Tracker. It's not an entirely unique framework, but James really makes it sing. My issues with the book are minor. Some of the settings weren't as fleshed out as they could have been, and the ending isn't entirely conclusive, but then it is the first in a trilogy. Since I'm hypercritical of fictional narratives, being them a writer myself, that list is honestly pretty short. On that note, from a writer's standpoint, it's hard not to hail the book as a triumph. James swings for the bleachers, and in my opinion, it works out. Clearly, inventing a mythos is already don't try this at home territory, but when you put in the effort to base it on real folklore and actually make something cohesive out of it, not to mention something highly entertaining, that's pretty fucking impressive. It's also great that a writer who won a huge literary fiction prize turned around and followed it up with a dark fantasy book. It's on the level of Everything Everywhere All at Once winning Best Picture, in that James basically proves that one can make serious art out of genre fiction. As I said previously, Black Leopard, Red Wolf is the first book in a trilogy, and that trilogy is still waiting for its last installment, but the second book, Moon Witch Spider King, is already out. When I get to that one, I'll let you know, but in the meantime, if you like paranoia, you're going to want to pick this book up. It's killer.